What's up, guys, and welcome back for another solo mining episode. We're gonna be out in the Porpoise today doing some drone mining, and I'm intentionally actually doing a really long mining session because that kind of aligns with the topic I want to talk about today, and that's just dealing with like paranoia, afraid to, or uncertain about staying in space for a long time because in the position I'm in, I get to talk to a lot of people, a lot of players, whether that be through Discord or here on the channel or in the Eve mails that I get in game. So I get to see a lot of people's concerns, a lot of people's questions, and generally a good beat on how players are feeling. I think it's very, very easy to read Reddit, to see certain YouTube videos, or to start building a narrative in your head that Eve is an extremely, extremely hostile and dangerous place. It is, but to the extreme extent that some, websites or some, communities might perceive it, probably not. I don't really have the same experience, and I've noticed there's a lot since I started making content. I don't have the same experience as seemingly what a lot of people do in terms of like getting ganked, not being able to stay in space. I think a lot of it has to do with location. I think it has a lot to do with just maybe bad situational awareness or whatever. But also I think like when you read that stuff, when you read, posts about people losing stuff on like Reddit, or you're looking at a very small sample size in a very large ocean, right? So the setup for today's episode is I am essentially going to be out in this Porpoise drone mining, and the goal is to mine this entire belt. Obviously the yield's not great. That's not really the point. The point is to actually sit on grid for the maximum amount of time to illustrate that in most cases nobody cares what you're doing. You can get unlucky, obviously. You can always get unlucky where somebody might run by and be like, oh, here's an easy target, and go for it. The system that I'm mining in today is in high sec, and it's got high 20s, low 30s in local. So it's not like I'm sitting in a high sec system of like 3 people. There's a lot of eyes. There's a lot of traffic moving through here. We're pretty close to Jita. We're in Caldari space, right? Like, we're basically doing everything we can to put ourselves in a situation that most people would be paranoid to be in space for a long amount of time. And so while I just sit here and kind of mine, we're going to just kind of talk about that a little bit more. I'm going to also, like, a lot of what I talk about on this channel dips into my my own personal experience. And when I started playing Eve, right, I didn't, coming into it, I didn't realize that, it was so open-ended on the PvP side, right? I think that if I knew what I know now coming into it, yeah, I would have been like super paranoid. And that's probably one of the more, that's kind of like like knowledge is like a blessing and a curse. The more you know of what can happen, the more you can kind of get in your own head about being worrisome about being in space and stuff. But for me, whenever I started playing, I didn't care. Like, I guess, you don't know what you don't know. I lost ships in the beginning, but I lost ships when I was dipping into nullsec with a retriever. Something that, after you have some experience and you kind of know how the game mechanics work, you're not going to do. In that situation back then, if I would have taken like, a really, nimble venture out there to that crocite anomaly, then I probably wouldn't have. And I lost that retriever on a gate, actually. I didn't even lose it in the anomaly, just because I was coming through, a watched gate during like a war or something. So it's like, yeah, In that situation, it's like not knowing is what got me that loss. And other than that, I didn't really have a whole lot of issues. It's like even when I decided to join a corporation and learn mining from experienced players, we spent hours a day just mining in the belts, never having issues. That even translates over to when I was doing nullsec mining. Obviously, you have roaming fleets coming through, and so some mining ops get cut short because once people kind of get a bead on that there's miners out in a system, you're kind of done for the day for the most part. But up until that point, until you're a made target, nullsec is was kind of boring for the most part. Like you'd rarely see people day to day. After I went solo and I was still in nullsec, and like a lot of my information and my goings on and everything were pretty much unknown to people, I had a lot more success at avoiding pretty much every confrontation. And that's kind of like tinfoil hat kind of stuff too. It's like I had a lot of issues with just fleets coming out of nowhere. You'd see them coming on intel from 15 jumps out, just making a beeline straight to where you're mining, and kind of conspiracy theorist in me is like, if you're associated in a big alliance and a lot of people in the alliance might have alts in other alliances, and they use some information in one alliance to do PvP content in their other alliance on their alts, it's like, but and the reason I think that happens a lot more than what people realize is because when I decided to step away from a nullsec alliance, from a nullsec corporation, when I decided to be in my own corporation, I stopped having crazy things like that happen to me. Because I didn't have, there was very few eyes on what I was doing. And also after you like go to nullsec, and you kind of get in the mentality, it's a whole different mentality when you're living in nullsec about like, how you operate. If you live in nullsec for a long time and you like go back to highsec, then you do kind of bring some of that stuff back with you, right? And everything. But when I was first in highsec before I went to nullsec, I didn't have really a care in the world. Like we would go out in our orcas with our covetors at the beginning, or eventually our hulks, and we would just mine. We'd mine every belt in the system and not really have a whole lot to worry about. And that was also in Caldari space. We still had extortion going on in the ice belts and stuff like that, so we just didn't mine ice, because we just didn't want to be hassled. But a lot of I think it's definitely I think it's easy to get to a point where, as a new player or even as a new miner, where you feel the longer you stay out mining, the greater your chances of losing your ship can be. And that's not necessarily false. I mean, obviously the more time you're out in space, the more time people are able to see what you're doing and prepare gang fleet against you or whatever. But for the most part, I don't think it's as bad as it seems in most cases. So probably the next few episodes of solo mining, we're going to be focusing on really, really long, or not really long, but I'm going to kind of like show more of my mining sessions, my daily mining sessions that I usually do, just so that hopefully I can motivate people kind of out of that, paranoia. Because I think once you get to the point where you just don't care, where if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, you're still going to play. I think once you get to that point, your enjoyment goes up really, really high, right? And it goes even down into the situation of like, maybe people are afraid to like get excited about getting into like exhumers and getting a Mackinac and getting high yield. They're afraid to even do that because they're like, well, if I do all that and I get all those skills and get that ship and I do all the work, am I even going to be able to like mine as much as I want to without just immediately losing a ship. And so it just, but a lot of it just comes down to like, I mean, I've always just played in almost like a very careful kind of method, but it allows me to stay out on grid. And if something seems fishy, then I'll make a change, right? Like for instance, like even out here doing this mining, right? If I see a bunch of, you know, strange activity, like people coming to grid, and I see a lot of, you know, what seems like people are kind of like watching or bookmarking my location or whatever, then yeah, I'm probably going to like move belts. Or if I start seeing a lot of, you know, common gang ships, you know, start flying through system, or a lot of bad standing corporations start coming through, then yeah, I'm probably going to change systems or change belts or go out and take a break, and wait for things to cool down. But you know, if I'm looking at D-scan and I see a bunch of miners and I see a bunch of people running home front operations and the traffic coming in is going out just as fast, I'm keeping all that, you know, in my head. I'm basically, you know, being observant to what's going on, and that's what allows me to kind of keep a head on a lot of that stuff. It's a pretty broad topic. I mean, you know, it's one of those things where it's like you don't want to give people like false hope and say, hey, you can stay out for X amount of time and you won't have any problems. You know, because some people will get unlucky and they'll, you know, get ganked, you know, and you don't want to be that person that's like, you know, gives them false hope and then, you know, it still happens to them, right? It's a very fine line you have to walk. So that's why I really don't talk about it too much, you know, and stuff. It's just, I think the best way to motivate people about it is just to show it, is to show the long mining sessions that I do every day. And, you know, you can see by just watching the videos, like how many people come to grid with me, where are they coming in, like what is D-scan looking like as I'm mining, and see that it's not necessarily as bad as like it could be perceived by reading things on Reddit. Because that's the other thing too, is it's like, you know, if 1% of players is getting ganked every time they go out and mine, and that 1% is immediately going to social media or Reddit and complaining about it, then that 1% of the player population now turns into like a much higher percentage of what you're seeing on Reddit, right? It's like, you know, the people that are going out for like 4 to 6 hours mining without any problems are not getting on Reddit and being like, I didn't see any action today, my mining ship is still intact, right? You don't see that potential like 99% of the population who aren't having issues. It's like all the shit is just kind of, you know, floating to the surface, and that's what's being seen. At least that's how I kind of justify it. That's kind of my interpretation of what I, you know, and the filter I put on when I'm looking at stuff online or seeing people complain about things and all that. But you can also, it's also one of those things too where it's like you can do a lot for yourself if you do get in a situation where you have problems, right? Making sure that you've got all the skills that maximize the ship and the fit that you're using. You know, have as much in your corner as possible. It's like, yeah, if you go out there with a ship that you barely are trained for the tank, or you don't have the navigation, you know, to get all like evasive maneuvering or any of those things in your toolbox to, you know, get off grid as fast as someone else might, you know, don't leave any of that stuff up to just chance. It's like I give myself as much opportunity to avoid problems by having those maxed skills and watching D-scan, watching local, and just, it's not just about like sitting out there and just mining, right? It's about getting a good idea of what's happening in the system. That's why you'll see my UI show the probe scanner and D-scan in separate windows. Like I want to see what anomalies are, not just popping up, but also going away. So if you see a bunch of combat anomalies, cycling through, and you see a bunch of combat ships on D-scan, then you get a pretty good idea that they're just running combat anoms, and that's just that helps you kind of put activities to ships on D-scan. And obviously, if you see a bunch of stuff on D-scan, like gank type ships and stuff, then chances are, they're probably not coming in to do home front operations or combat anoms. They're probably looking for a kill. And that's another thing too. Is another tip you can do is like sort your D-scan by type, right? When you sort it by type, then it's very easy to see if a fleet full of catalysts come in, because then you have all the catalysts right there on the list next to each other, and it makes it a little bit easier to interpret that information. But I just wanted to kind of briefly cover that. I know that the last thing I want is for people to be afraid to go out there and just mine as much as they want to, feel like they are kind of handicapped and stuff like that. So hopefully, like I said, hopefully this episode is motivational to those people who want to go out there and do long mining sessions, because that's what it's kind of like. That's a lot of the enjoyment, right? The enjoyment is like training those mining ships and getting that high yield, so you can go out there. If you're able to play for several hours in a day, then you want to be able to go out there and just stack as much material as possible and not be paranoid all the time, because that's that also leads to burnout. If you're always just paranoid and anxious when you're out in space, that's even if you're just working through it and you're just getting it done, like after a while you're gonna burn out mentally and stuff like that. It's like so if you're sitting in Poshvin, right, and you're watching D-scan and you're checking pirates in space from the map and everything, like everything's good to go, you're still anxious. It's still every single second of every cycle is just you never know, and that can just build up and everything. But nullsec is that's what I'll tell you. Like, if you don't mind playing the political game, if you don't mind doing the whole nullsec potential nullsec drama that comes from corporations and alliances, it's one of the safest places to mine. The danger out there isn't necessarily players. The danger out there is really kind of the PvE side of things. And not really the rats, right? If you have your own solo fleet, you can, or even just like a Mackinac, it does just fine with taking down the rats out there. But really, it's about it's really about the rat capital lottery. Essentially, you can go a week mining those anomalies out there and never see a rat carrier or a rat dread or whatever, and everything's fine and dandy. And then one day you can see 3 of them in a single day and be like, yeah, I'm done mining for the day. And that's happened to me before too. It's like there was one day where I say we, but I was doing I was just clearing Merc, I think, and in a procure. So I usually would start my day with just clearing all the Mercoxit that was in the system, and then I'd go after the Omber and the Crocite and the non-Arknor Bistot, stuff during the morning. And then I would just try to roll an anomaly by getting the rest of the Arknor Bistot. So when I was out there with Merc, I got a few rocks done, and then there we got a rat dread. Not a big deal, kind of inconvenient. So come off grid, jump in. I usually kept a Phoenix around for that purpose. A couple of Phoenixes, And so, go switch the ults everybody over, go take down the dread, clean up the wreck. Cool. Go back to Merc mining. And like 30 minutes later, on a different anom, boom, another dread. Do it all again, and it gets old after a while, because it's like when you're out there taking care of it with the Phoenix or whatever you decide to take out there to get rid of it. You're leaving that ship exposed to, like, if a player fleet comes in while you're trying to take care of this really obnoxious PvE target. So after a while, it's just, that's kind of that's more of a worry out there in nullsec when it comes to miners than actual player fleets. I mean, if a player fleet comes into system and you're like the only one other than maybe your corporation and local, very easy to see. If intel is good, you're probably going to see them before they even get to system. So conflict is very, very easy to avoid in nullsec. What's hard to avoid is a random, like, capital rat ship just plopping on grid with you, and you got to make sure that you have that stuff on your overview as well, because there was one time where I had like a new alt, and I hadn't copied over the overview settings for them, and they were out doing mining, and I was able to get off grid, but I had like a few seconds before I got neutered out completely. But yeah, if you don't have those ships on your overview, then unless you are zoomed out and to see them, come on the grid with you, if you're like zoomed in or whatever, because they usually come out around the perimeter of the anomaly, it's very easy to miss them completely because they are not on your overview by default. So, and that just goes into the more knowledge, the more things you learn about the game and the more mechanics you learn, you start adapting your overview to compensate for that stuff, and so you don't have any surprises and stuff. But I think that in the other thing too is, like, in other areas of space, there's no real need to be out for several hours, even with moon mining, for instance, in like nullsec, right? If you're a part of a corporation and there's a lot of people out there, like, that moon might only last a few hours before the majority of the volume is gone. Really, the only way that you can obviously go chain anomalies back to back, but with the materials you get out there, I've usually only did like maybe 1 hour mining session a day, and then the rest of the day was doing PI or going out in the golem, doing some PvE stuff, some ratting. I was able to do you're able to just do a lot of different activities and not really kind of like go crazy with the mining. High sec gets a lot easier to just be like, I'm gonna mine all day, because you don't have to worry about those capital rats. But high sec, you do have to worry more about players, obviously, because ganking is just one of those things that that's never going to go away. I mean, because as long as there are inexperienced players taking expensive ships out in space, then there's always going to be opportunities for people to be as positive on suicide ganking, that stuff, and everything. But I don't know. I don't want to spend too much time on it. I want to just like let the footage kind of hopefully motivate you, and I'm not gonna blow smoke up here. It's like I said, like, I could go 4, 5, 6 hours mining without any issue one day, and then the next day I might have issues. The best advice I can give is just always be ready to take a break. Always be, if anything feels iffy, if your spidey senses go off about anything, make a change. Change the belt you're on, change the ship you're in, change the system you're in. Just change something, make yourself that hard target that I'm always kind of talking about and stuff like that. But that's kind of one of the major topic I wanted to talk about today. The rest of this episode is going to be probably, we're going to kind of flip the script on you guys. I know I'm usually answering a lot of questions on these things, but I'm going to probably ask a few questions of you guys. You don't have to answer everything. You know, if there's a question that you do have a good answer for, you know, let me know in the comments and stuff. But it's just general, a lot of it's just general curiosities for, in terms of like mining and gameplay and stuff. But because it is difficult for me to kind of know what maybe newer players or even newer miners are kind of thinking and wondering. But I guess the first big question I have is like, you know, obviously I'm not ISK per hour focused, but when you're first starting off with anything in Eve, you know, you kind of have to be. You have to build that bankroll. You kind of have to build up your arsenal of things until you get to the point where you're kind of just, you know, set. You do have to kind of like worry about how much income you're getting for the ships you're buying and things like that. And I guess the first question I have for you guys is, and this doesn't even necessarily need to be just like mining related, but what would you guys consider a good what's a good amount of ISK per day? Like if you and like I guess we'll just say in terms of mining, right? I remember back in the day whenever I was first starting mining, I was like, I want to get up to where I'm doing like 1 billion a day. That's pretty good. 30 billion a month, no big deal. Obviously it's doable. Is it sustainable? Probably not. And then, you know, further down the road, my intention was, well, I just need to, you know, make sure I can cover Omega on that account. I want that account to do, you know, whatever the cost of Omega is at the time, divided by 30. That's what I want to make a day. Which I don't think is a horrible situation. But I really want to know what your kind of perspective is. If you had to focus on ISK per day, what would you consider a good amount? The next question I have is, and I feel like I probably know the answer to this one, but for EVE Online specifically, what is your definition of solo? Is it single account, single character, no fleet, solo, or is it the like EVE solo where it's like single heartbeat? Where but you still have like fleets and stuff. Obviously you guys know what my definition is. My definition of solo is single heartbeat. You know, if I'm the only one out there controlling everything, then yeah, I'm solo. And the root of this question actually comes from it's one of the big reasons why I stopped doing solo fleet mining for this series, because I was getting a lot of kind of pushback on like the definition, like solo mining, but he's in a fleet, even though, you know, he's by himself, it's still not solo account, right? So that was really one of my big motivations to just stop doing those fleets. Just, you know, it made if it was like convoluted, it just made everything a little bit more, I guess, simpler. I do miss it though, and obviously, like, you know, I would love to hear you guys' like feedback on that. You know, one, let me know what your definition of solo is, and also it's like, does it really bother anybody that a solo mining series has single heartbeat fleets mining, right? It's like, I think that definition, my definition, still is valid for that, because a lot of me does want to still do like you know, Porpoise Mac mining for this series. It's just I don't want to inadvertently mislead people into thinking they're watching, you know, a solo mining series, but the guy's got nothing but a bunch of like accounts that he's controlling. But I feel like that's subjective for the most part. It's like, if you are a miner, chances are you have alts, and I would say like probably the vast majority of people who play EVE have alts. maybe not alts in the sense that they're building, a fleet with them. Like, I think a lot of people might have alts just like that they log in, they're in a different area of space and do a different kind of task. It's like miners and industrialists are a little bit different in the sense that a lot of their alts are built to work online together, whether that be for mining or whatever. But that's really, I really do want to know. That's one of my biggest curiosities, because I think that you guys, from based on the numbers I see and with the content I've done in the past, some of the most popular mining content that I've seen historically has been drone mining, right? Specifically, like Orca is probably Orca drone mining is probably the most popular mining topic across the board, which is kind of interesting because I get a lot of like pushback when it comes to drone mining. It's like, oh, it's not, it's, poor yield, it's poor ISK per hour. And I think that for the people who are worried about ISK per hour, you got to realize, like, if I'm drone mining, it's because I don't care what ISK per hour is. If I really wanted to like do something crazy and get a lot of income in a short amount of time, then I have the capabilities to go out there and do that. It's more of like a gameplay kind of thing for me. And I don't feel the need to sit here and justify why I like drone mining. I think that it's I've kind of talked about that ad nauseum, but I always like hearing the viewers perspective on different things, especially when it comes to like definitions of solo and like, especially like what type of content you enjoy consuming, whether it be single, watching somebody, single account mine, or if you really want to see the mining process when it comes to fleet mining solo. And I think that's probably one of the more other more popular topics, is because there is a lot of nuance to how you operate multiple accounts efficiently and consistently, and a lot of that, a lot of those skills can rub off kind of just on watching somebody go through the process day in and day out. So I definitely think the channel's been missing kind of that aspect of the mining thing, because it's a big part. It's like, if you really, and also I'm just kind of dipping into my own experiences and for the people I've been around and the situations I've been in. But for me, going to the very, very highest extent in terms of mining meant seeing literally everybody in the corporation have their own basically mining fleet, where we would do moon mining ops, and there would be, you could just kind of tell where everybody was in like their skill training and stuff. You'd have somebody would have a Porpoise and maybe a mix of coveters and hulks, and you'd have the guy who has been at it forever, and he's got his Rorqual out there, and lined up behind him are all his max shield hulks. And then it's like, even in a corporation, even in an industrial manufacturing mining corporation where there is 10, 15, 20 people who are active, everybody is in a damn fleet. And they're all in the same standing fleet, obviously, but they're all in their own squad. So I think that, like, drawing a line in the sand and saying, solo is strictly solo account, solo character is, I think that it just doesn't make sense for EVE Online and kind of just how it's built and how we've grown accustomed to playing. But with don't take any of that into consideration with your answer. I want to know your actual feelings on the subject, because everybody knows like how I feel. I mean, if I really wanted to stress myself out and just go crazy, yeah, I'd be back doing Rorqual 8 Hulk ice mining, which is a insane yield. But yeah, let me know on that one, because, and I guess it's like a double question too. It's like, let me know your definition of solo, but also it's like, do you miss the solo fleet mining content that I used to do, / should I bring it back? I guess we'll go with that. this this question portion is pretty loaded, but yeah, very curious to know your answer. The time of the morning where the sun comes straight into my window, so that's why I look all blown out in this portion. But next question is gonna be fun. This is gonna be a fun one. It's always fun to speculate and everything, but I think I want to know like what additions or improvements you would like to see to the mining process. Now that's specifically to mining, not necessarily to industry or manufacturing, but like to the actual mining process. And this is something that I've touched on in the past. A lot of my answers are pretty much still the same, but just to give you guys my thoughts on the matter, I think that laser mining is fine where it's at. Obviously, I'm a drone miner fan, so I want to see improvements or changes to that. I don't think we need to see like yield changes to the Orca or the Porpoise for drones. I don't think you even need to change the yield for Miner 2s or Miner 1s, or well, drone mining Tech 1s and Tech 2s or augmented drones. Instead, what I would like to see in terms of the drones is something like modulated drones, and maybe like a new high slot item. You can call it like deep core drone augmenter or something. It allows you to essentially load crystals, and then the actual modulated drones would get crystal based yield, depending on what you have loaded into it, including mercoxit. So you'd have these modulated drones would actually be able to mine mercoxit if you have the merc crystal in that high slot. Now, to expand on that a little bit more, this high slot item that I'm talking about wouldn't go on the Orca. It wouldn't go on the Porpoise. It wouldn't go on expeditionary frigates or exhumers or mining barges. It would go instead on what I think we need is a dedicated drone mining ship. We're talking about a ship that is like either destroyer or, as far as tank goes, is like comparable to like a destroyer or a battle cruiser, probably a cruiser or battle cruiser. But it can't fit lasers, so it can't do laser mining. It has a drone bay. It has very limited high slots, enough to facilitate maybe a few small remote shields, and the new high slot item, like I talked about, like something that you could load crystals in and basically augment your modulated drones. And these like modulated drones would be only be usable by this ship, right? So you wouldn't be able to use modulated drones on Orca, Porpoise, or any of the other barges or exhumers. And essentially this ship, with its bonuses, are primarily focused on drone mining. It has lower tanks, so it's not like you can just go tank the thing out completely and be unstoppable, but its focus is like purely drone mining, not drone and laser. I think that'd be interesting, because then it would allow people like me who enjoy the aspect of drone mining to have the option of going exhumer barge for laser mining, but then I can get the same equivalent yield if I want to do the drone mining route with the specialized ship. That's probably the biggest suggestion I would make to CCP, is having a ship like that. And if I didn't want to even go that far into it, as far as like having a new class of drones and stuff like that, then like at least give us some drone that could do mercoxit and things. It's like the only ore out there that we can't mine with drones. But and I'm sure that's by design or whatever, but I think that'd be really cool to see. I've also talked in the past about having an actual ore titan. This ore titan wouldn't necessarily do drone mining. It wouldn't do laser mining. It would do burst, like it would do burst on like steroids, right? It could do like a very large radius and things. But I think a cool feature for like an ore titan would be, you know, all the big, large, you know, decorative asteroids you see like on like anomalies and stuff like that. These really huge rocks that are obviously just pure decoration now. But I think it'd be interesting to see scannable spawns of those, and the ore titan would be able to go to this location and it would be able to essentially fracture this thing into like a mini mining anomaly that then a fleet could come out and mine, which I think would be really interesting. So either like the ore titan would come out and fracture the rock and then leave grid, or it could stay on grid and provide compression and command burst and stuff, or it just, like I said, it can come off grid after it fractures, and then you bring in like your oracles and you know, have a pretty sizable maintenance bay on this thing. Have a, you know, obviously having a Titan size, you know, fleet hangar on a mining focused Titan would be really interesting. But there's a lot of things they could do with like an ore Titan that I think would, you know, benefit mining in general, but just kind of give us that like class of ship, because like the biggest thing we have right now is the Oracle, and in most cases it's kind of not efficient to use the Oracle anymore. And I think if they were going to do like a full pass on like drone mining and stuff like that, I think that, you know, you could almost get rid of excavators as well, and you know, go a different route. I think it would also be interesting to like see excavators like changed. Maybe they're a little bit more akin to like their controls and stuff like that are a little bit more akin to like fighters, where excavators could have like that same fighter like UI that where fighters have like secondary weapons and prop mods and stuff like that. Let excavators operate a little bit more like fighters. I mean, if they're already going to be slow and obnoxious, like give us a little bit more control over those guys. And I think like the Ore Titan could use, you know, excavators, or like the Excavator Plus or whatever, you know, which would operate a little bit more like fighters and stuff. That way, if you don't want to, if like you have like somebody in your corporation that is like that Ore Titan pilot, and they do want to get some yield on themselves with, in the Titan while on grid, they have a way to do that. And I think that's why they never really took drone mining away from like Orca or Porpoise, because it's like in a lot of situations where you have a single person in a corporation who's in charge of being out on grid and providing command bursts, the drones give them something to do while they're just kind of boosting everybody else. If you take drones away from like Orca, Porpoise, then all you're going to do is force people to run Orca, Porpoise on an alt all the time, because otherwise there would be nothing else to do on that character. They could even go back, you know, step back a little bit, like with the Ore Titan, where the Rorqual used to be able to sit in a POS and basically boost the entire system with its command burst. They could bring that kind of gameplay back for an Ore Titan's burst, where it could sit at a location, maybe not a protected location like a POS, but it could sit in one location on the system and kind of cover everything. So it could essentially go out there and fracture all these locations. Like, you know, phase one of your mining op would be going out to the system and fracturing all these big rocks, and then, you know, chilling on the last one and just, you know, burst the entire system. And everybody could do mining and stuff like that. And obviously you have your conduit jump capabilities, your bridging and all that stuff. You can bridge your mining fleet and all that stuff. But other than that, it's like, I think mining is in a pretty good spot. I would like just, you know, I don't necessarily like, you know, having to use the Orca or Porpoise for drone mining. But, you know, give me an option to run a ship that has much less tank than an Exhumer, even less tank than a mining barge, but allows it to get bonuses to drones, and I'll use that thing all day, every day. Like that would get me excited, and that's really what I want. One of my big motivations actually to do covering mining content for EVE Online on this channel is to, you know, motivate people and to get people excited for the things I get excited about. And hopefully, I would love to actually get to the point where I could work with CCP on making like good improvements or additions to the mining process. Because I want people to get excited about mining again. Just like, you know, when we all started, you know, if you're an experienced miner, when you first started off, you were just excited to like get to that next ship, get to that exhumer, get to that orca, you know, get that next alt, you know, get, you know, max that yield out. You know, you got really excited about going out there and just seeing how much ore you could, you know, rake in a day. And it's kind of stagnant right now. Like, you know, the mining side of industry is very stagnant, and I want there to be like a breath of fresh air and stuff again. So maybe, you know, I think that like I think my ideas are good. I don't think they're overpowered. I think they could, you know, make for some interesting gameplay. But I definitely want to know what your guys' thoughts are and what ideas you have. Now, this next question is not necessarily mining related, but just more of like a general curiosity. What do you guys spend ISK on? Because, I mean, for me, I used to spend it on skill injectors back before the diminishing return was too great, or when I used to, you know, collect mining ships, or when I had carriers or titans, or like I kind of just like kept all that stuff kind of fitted and whatnot. But I'm just generally curious, like, you know, at what stage are you with like your, I guess it's a two-part question, so it is kind of mining related. What stage are you in like your mining journey, and you know, how has your ISK spending changed at different intervals? For me, to answer this question, is like when you first start off, you're buying skill books. You know, when you get into a new ship or you get a new alt, you're buying the mining ships and maybe even like skill injectors to get, you know, all your alts lined up. And then once you kind of get once I got like my fleet and everything set up, you know, maybe I was you know, getting them all matching skins or whatever. But I've gotten to the point now where I don't spend, there's not a whole lot for me to actually spend ISK on. One thing I'm actually like investing in right now, well, I wouldn't really say investing, I'm just kind of like buying them, but I've been spending ISK on Imperial Gold nano coatings. So I actually got a really good deal a couple days ago. Those things are usually north of like 100 million each. I managed to snag like 20-ish of them for like 45 million each. And so what I'm really doing is I'm just kind of collecting them, you know. It'd be interesting to see actually if, you know, we see one of those situations like in a lot of other MMOs where, or other games where certain game items become like a player currency. So for instance, like Diablo 2, you know, you had the SOJ ring that became like essentially the currency, or like, you know, high-end Fallout 76 currency would be like, you know, intellect or intelligence and leader bobbleheads, not necessarily caps. Or, you know, it'd be interesting to see if there was like an item currency that, you know, started, you know, at the player level. And I could see like, you know, high-end rare nano coatings from the Skinner to be like potentially a currency. And it would be kind of funny if like the Imperial Gold was one of those, because it is so expensive. But it allows you to make like a completely gold ship, which I've, you know, been tossing around the idea. Been tossing around the idea of like, you know, making all of my mining ships gold skinned and everything, which I think is more of just like something to, you know, amuse me than anything else. Because the cost of like, let's say the cost of building like a full Imperial Gold skin for like the Venture would be over 2 billion. So then if I'm out there mining in a completely solid gold Venture, it's like, wow, it's like got a 2 bill skin on that ship. But in all honesty, if you go in there to Skinner and you actually look at, you'll throw Imperial Gold metallic on every slot, a lot of the mining ships look really, really cool. Plated out like that. I don't do the saffron gold because it just doesn't look as gold. But yeah, I guess the long answer to that question for myself is like I pretty much check the market every single day or a couple times a day for Imperial Gold nano coatings, and I got like 41 of them now on my main, which is pretty decent. I do wish they would change it to where, like, based on the size of ship you're skinning, every ship shouldn't require 4 for every single slot. Like, a Venture should not take the same amount of nano coatings that a Rorqual does. Right now it's like 16 if you want to do 16 nano coatings for regardless of ship size or class or whatever. And obviously, you know, they would probably change it up instead of down. Like, you know, they'd probably change it to where like Rorqual, Titan, Dread, Carrier, all those would require like 5 or 6 per slot. But then like let the smaller ships be like, a Venture should only take like 4 nano coatings, 1 for each slot. That's one of the major changes I would want to see in Skinner, is just like, it shouldn't be a flat 4 per slot for every single thing. It just gets expensive really fast. I've had some success on Skinner selling. I mean, really a lot of it was experimentation when it first came out. I made a bunch of skins, had some left over, put them on the hub. They sold. Am I going to try to build like a skin empire? No. Skinner is a currency sink. Nothing more, nothing less. Yeah, if you know, it's a really quick way for me to, you know, get the full blackout skin on my ships and not worry about it. But don't be surprised if you start seeing solid gold mining ships in my videos, because I've been tossing the idea around in my head for about a week now, and probably the only reason I haven't done it yet is because I wanted to see how long it took to actually acquire the Imperial Gold nano coatings. And I think I just got really lucky when I bought like those 21 or so for like 45 million each, because now it's like they're north of like 150 million for one. So I'm kind of waiting. I'm like, how many am I able to get over the course of a month to justify skinning 14 ships with it? Because that'd be like what, over 200 nano coatings to do all of ore for that. And I'm also waiting too, because like I don't want to like, you know, sequence those expensive skins on like my alts. I am in the process of trying to consolidate to the point where like I actually bring my main out and do all the content you see on the channel with the main, with the actual namesake. But and that's probably what I'll wait on. I'll probably wait till the main finally leaves Jita, and then, you know, it's just mining in solid gold ships. The biggest reason I don't use the main, and like it would make sense for me to, because like I have like an industry alt who has a lot, like 90 something million skills, full miner, full command miner, a lot of production and science skills. That was actually the tune that started solo mining as an alpha. And then it was also the tune that ended up going to nullsec and doing a bunch of stuff. So she just kind of ended up with a lot of skill points over the years. But over the past year at least, she's got like 90 million. And then this tune that I'm running on now is a newer character. I think she has like 60, maybe 50 or 60 million. The thing is like, it would make more sense for my namesake tune to do all this stuff, because my main has 160 million skill points. I think it's a little shy on like the production side. It's really mostly like a lot of like ratting PvE stuff. So if I was going to truly, you know, replace every alt that I kind of use on a day-to-day basis with just the main would have to come up a lot on production. mostly resource processing. That's the other thing too, is like my industry alt is, close to max on all the resource processing, so that I get better repros rate on ores and stuff like that. And that's kind of like the overall goal for me is to like get to the point where all I have to do is just play on the main and do all the things that we do for the channel, and then all these alts that I'm using right now would essentially be there if I want to do alt plus Porpoise, alt plus Orca or something like that, or keep them around. I'm always gonna have an alt around for Sinos to move bigger ships and stuff. So the fact that like they're able to kind of jump on and pilot a mining ship while I boost it is always a good option. And I know I've talked about it a lot over the past few episodes, and it's like it's an ongoing thing. It's just a consolidating and it's a simplification of like everything. A lot of my income comes from SP farming right now, just because I have a lot of accounts that still have like 1 to 2 years of Omega, and I'm not adding Omega to them anymore. I'm just letting them run out essentially. I don't do SP mining as like an actual legitimate venture, like a way to like make it. It's more or less, I want these other accounts that I'm not using to provide some value while their Omega runs out. So most of them are set up with improved clones. They are going to essentially just train skills. They're all sitting in Jita. They're going to just train skills, and we'll juice them out when they're close to their Omega expiring. And once their Omega expires, they're probably just going to get removed from my launcher and not used. I think the goal for me is to actually only have maximum like 3 accounts, which would be like main account and then 2 accounts that just have 1 tune on them. Those 2 accounts would be potentially PI alts. Those would be potential miners, and most certainly Sinos. That allows me my main to have options to, if I want to move like a capital ship around, I have a couple of Sino alts to do that. Or if I want to go out and do like a Orca plus 2 Hulk, or Porpoise plus 2 Hulk, or Mackinac or something, I have that kind of option too. So I know I probably went off on like a tangent. I don't even remember what the question was, but I guess that's another good question too, just like tack on the end of this as well, is just in your mind, what is like, I mean, obviously you, in mining and industry and all that stuff and PI, it's hard to like operate with just one character. Especially, I wouldn't say it's hard to operate with one account. One character is difficult, especially like PI and stuff. You could have one account with 3 characters on it for PI and just log them in one after another and like collect, and no big deal. I think with the way the game is structured right now, mining is at a high level. To support high level manufacturing is difficult as a solo player if you don't have multiple accounts. If you do like what I've been doing lately, I haven't been doing a whole lot of like solo fleet mining. If you're just going out there for a couple hours a day, mining in a Mackinac or whatever, and that's supplying like a manufacturing kind of situation, you're not going to be doing anything like crazy high volume. And then when you start getting into like capital ship construction, and when you start requiring different styles of gas, and the different types of ice, and all of the different type of PI up to like level 4, that stuff, it gets very, very difficult to do it with a single account, with like a single account 3 tunes, especially with just a single account 1 tune. So like, what, in your opinion, what, as an industrialist, as a miner, what do you think like a good number of accounts / characters are? I think honestly, like, I would feel very, very not comfortable with like 3 accounts, 9 characters. But even, and only 9 characters because of like PI, having like 3 accounts that each have 3 tunes on them, and they're set up for PI. You can also do some interesting stuff with Sinos there as well. If you have like a Sino account that has like 3 tunes on it, and you have like them like kind of staged along a route, you'd like jump your capital, so you'd have your capital, your main logged in, and then you had the first Sino alt logged in. You make that first jump, and then you basically log out your Sino, log in the second Sino character on that same account, and then to make that next jump, and so forth. So you could facilitate, 6 jumps on a seeded route with just 2 accounts, 6 characters, pretty easily. Whenever I used to do like jump freighter logistics and stuff in and out of Null, I basically had 1 Sino per account, which is nice in its own sense. It allows you to have everybody online, and you can like kind of see the whole route and what's going on along the route. But I usually when I started just going really slow and methodical with my jumping, and I had no issue. Like, I'd always be like jumping out of Jita with like with a full contract load. And even if I was only jumping like once every couple of hours, I was still faster than like a lot of the bigger dedicated logistics corporations in the Alliance that were taking a lot longer. And I was just facilitating contracts for my corp and stuff. I think if you were supporting like an entire alliance with a corporation that has multiple people dedicated to it, yeah, it's gonna add a lot of time and stuff. Once Lancer Dreads came out, I pretty much got out of jump rating because it just got kind of ridiculous. And also, my mindset for how I was operating in Null kind of changed too. Instead of like trying to import and export to make my profits and stuff, I tried to just produce everything I could in Null, and then also sell everything I could in Null, which allowed for more stability, better turnaround, and things like that. But that's kind of how that kind of transpired. But once there was a lot of political stuff that was happening in Null. I don't even remember, it's been probably like a year since I've been really in Null. I can't remember. Whenever the last like solo nullsec video was pretty much when we were in nullsec. But there was a lot of like political stuff going on, a lot of stuff changing hands, and I just decided to come back to highsec for a little while, because my buddies ended up leaving the alliance they were in and moving to another region, just because like I said, powers were shifting. Maybe I'll go back, I don't know. It really just depends on if I see any value in it, for the most part. But otherwise, I'm pretty happy with like my current setup even in highsec. I know it's not very glamorous. Excuse me. I know it's not very glamorous, but also I don't really necessarily need ISK. I've done a lot of the activities. I've experienced a lot of that stuff. And really, about the only reason I would actually go and do a lot of the activities I've done in the past again would be to share it with you guys. But I feel like I've kind of shared a lot of it too, and everything. But I like my setup. I like my kind of like gameplay loop. I do my project discovery, tapping a little bit more into PI now, as you've probably noticed. Even in highsec, it's just a nice little challenge to see what can be produced there with that. And I get to do my mining. I get to do some like industry and get to do some trading. I do miss like Merc mining. I do miss Golem ratting in nullsec. Taking the Tengu out and doing like combat noms and stuff like that, or doing reactions. But as much as I love those activities, the amount of crap you have to kind of deal with just to facilitate the ability to do that isn't really worth it, really. But yeah, it's just kind of how it is, though. It's like, and that's how it's been kind of for the past 2 years or so, for the most part. It's like, I'll spend some time in mining in highsec, and then if there's a good opportunity for me in nullsec, I'll take my solo operation out there and operate for a little bit. If things start to like go in directions I don't like out there, then I have the freedom. I have the freedom to just leave and go back to high sec and do some stuff. It also I have the freedom to draw. I could like literally just sell every asset that I have in high sec right now and move everybody to Poshman and just live in Poshman if I wanted to. I have that freedom to do so. Or if I want to do the same thing, if I was like, hey, I'm just gonna go live in a wormhole, I have that freedom. And I think that's Eve is a social game. There's a lot of things that cannot be done solo. There's a lot of content that has to be done in larger fleets, but you also give up a lot of freedoms being attached to larger corporations, larger alliances in doing so. And I guess one of the biggest questions is like, why am I solo in an MMO? And I've come from an MMO background. Like even when I played WoW back in the day, if it wasn't for like doing weekly raids for potential drops for my character, I was basically solo doing that stuff, multi-boxing and whatever. It's kind of just like a preferred method of gameplay for me. Any game I play, I'm gonna figure out I'm either gonna do it solo or I'm gonna multi-box it. Sometimes I'll still do social stuff for the sake of just hanging out with people, but as far as the day-to-day grind for me, for the most part, I'm always kind of like solo focused. And I went into Eve with that same mentality. It's like I didn't come into Eve and get into this huge community and then decide, oh, I just want to try it solo. I literally started playing Eve with the solo mindset. The only reason I joined a corporation was to kind of expedite the learning process and to learn the different ins and outs of the game. But I've always had that solo mentality. And I think that's where a lot of people get confused too. It's like it's a multiplayer game, but even if you are deeply invested in the big fleets, the big war things, and the really large scale stuff, at the end of the day, the majority of time spent is still going to be solo. You could be strictly an F1 monkey in a large, war alliance, but if they don't have a war going on or if there's no engagement, you're probably out by yourself somewhere doing combat noms or exploration, or you're probably doing something by yourself. And that was like the biggest turning point for me near the end of like my, corporation alliance involvement in nullsec, was like coming to the realization that after the mining op for the day, which only lasted like an hour or so at best, the rest of my time spent in Eve was me doing stuff by myself, figuring it out, like, because there just wouldn't be people online to do ops and stuff like that. It's like, well, why am I associated with this large group of people and dealing with all this drama if 80 to 90% of the time I'm doing things by myself anyway? So then I started looking for ways to maintain my existence in Null while being solo. One of those first steps I took was making my own corporation, doing my own recruitment. I had 2 corporations actually. That's what our alliance required. We needed a high sec wing, and we needed the null sec corporations, and they required us to vet people through a high sec. And I had no interest. I had no interest in recruiting anybody into my corporation. I made the corporation so that I could be solo, right? And I could have my own corp hangers and stuff. But essentially, I was able to have my corporation part of the alliance. But then I had to make like a high sec, wing or arm of it to do recruiting. And I just never brought anybody over. I recruited people into the high sec side of my corporation. And, I did the whole I helped train, new miners and stuff like that. But I really had no intention of ever bringing anybody over to the null side. And most of the time retention is so bad in Eve anyway, that before they even were able to run Tech 2 tank, they were either not logging on anymore, or they were off doing some other, F1 monkey stuff that required a much less time investment for mining. So once it got to that point, I was like, I'm done recruiting for this high sec corporation, because I know I don't have any intention in like bringing anybody to the nullsec side, because that just defeats the entire purpose. It's like if I'm trying to break away into like my own solo corporation, bringing other people in, just it's not solo. It's like I'm just running a different corporation for the alliance. So I ended up leaving the alliance completely for that, and still wanting to maintain my presence in nullsec. I turned to like renting for a while, but then I got really like ISK focused on what I wanted to do. I downsized a lot. I really wanted to like not hold a lot of assets. I operated my own jump freighter for my corporation. I did all my own logistics, but I basically, for the longest time, my last real big stint in Null, I was doing basically golem ratting, ice mining. I was making fuel blocks for the alliance. I was able to actually rent a system for myself, being the only person in the corporation, made fuel blocks and then sold them to the alliance. So I was providing a service there. The only reason I stopped doing that was because I saw the ISK I was spending to rent the system. I saw that, I was like, well, I could just keep that in my wallet and go do something else, because I got to the point where I was doing well enough and I wasn't required. I didn't need a lot of assets. I didn't need to replace a lot of ships. There's no real need to do high amounts of ISK per hour. So instead of spending that money to rent a system, I decided just to simplify my whole life and just get away from like feeling the need to be attached to like nullsec for the most part. My friends are still all my friends are still in nullsec. They are running a very successful corporation out there. So, and they're really supportive of me and my content and what I kind of do. If I have to like if I want to cover like nullsec PI, or if I want to cover nullsec anoms, all I gotta do is shoot them a message and be like, hey, this is what I'm thinking, this is what I want to do, this is what I want to cover. And they've been really good about letting me come out there and kind of cover what I need to cover without really committing a whole lot. And obviously, like while I'm out there, I support them with PI or fuel blocks the best I can. But it's really nice having like kind of those guys out there, and that allows me to have like nullsec content options and stuff without really necessarily having to go and rent a whole system, or jump into an alliance and do the whole show and stuff. I'll probably never change. I'll probably always be solo. I think that my ultimate goal probably is to be even a little bit more nimble in how I can move around. Right now I spend a lot of time in high sec, doing a lot of stuff in high sec, but I even with the very few amount of assets that I operate with right now, excuse me, it still feels like too much. I mean, I'm essentially daily driving like only 2 tunes really, if you don't count the main. Those 2 tunes have some mining ships, some logistics ships and stuff like that, but it's like I want to go even further down the minimalistic path than that. I want to go like down to like 1 tune, 1 ship, go into a wormhole and not look back, right? And just kind of figure it out. Like that is something that excites me, like the extreme solo side. And that's one of the big reasons I started the nomadic mining series. It's like a way to hopefully eventually transition to where I'm just kind of always on the move, and the mining content that I'm making now across like all the different series and stuff, especially this series, hopefully will be able to I'll be able to kind of transition to where I'm just like in the wind essentially. And a lot of that has to do with just like making things more convenient for myself too. It's like when I first started doing content, I was concealing as much as I could, like the locations I was operating in, especially in nullsec. A lot of that had to do with just courtesy to my friends out in nullsec, and OPSEC reasons. I obscured a lot of like where I was, what I was doing, put a lot of effort into hiding where I was operating with the content I was making. And that was kind of the understanding. It's like, they didn't mind me doing content out there. It's just they didn't want me throwing up, a location beacon and them just having problems, because they are an industrial corporation. So out of respect for that, it's why I would conceal a lot of my location. And I just got to the point where I just didn't care anymore. I didn't want to spend extra time, blurring different parts of the screen or making sure certain UI elements were covered or not shown. And I think that's one really big benefit of doing nomadic type gameplay, solo nomadic type gameplay, is it doesn't matter if you see what system I'm in while you're watching the video. Chances are by the time you're watching it, I'm already 10 episodes deep into a series, and God knows how many systems down a wormhole chain, or even, in high sec in a completely different region, right? Because there is some control there. Probably one of the bigger reasons I don't like live stream either. Not really OPSEC reasons, but mostly just, real life, circumstance. But I think that's kind of the ultimate goal. I don't know if nomadic mining is going to end up being a very long series like solo mining has become. And honestly, I would prefer to do the more solo nomadic stuff in solo mining, and when I get to that point, because I've had the urge to I literally have to fight back the urge to sell absolutely every asset that I own except for the prospect, and then just go on the road and cover whatever I come across, and in that sense, it would be every day would be a different wormhole system or Poshman, or just constantly moving. And I think that's interesting in terms of mining. In the scope of mining and always moving like that is a very, very interesting concept, because most people are extremely entrenched when it comes to mining. They're in nullsec, they're operating in a few systems, they have a lot of assets. It's way too expensive logistically for them to move around a lot. Even in high sec, people will set up and in systems and stockpile stuff and not have the freedom to really move. This kind of went on a a completely different tangent on the back half of this, but I think it's important for you guys to understand what my goals are in terms of mining, especially for content on the channel. And because it's if you're not happy with the content you're making, well, I guess if you're not happy with the activity you're doing in a game, you're not going to be happy with the content you're making. And how are you going to motivate other people? It's a lot. I don't know, I can't speak for everybody on YouTube or every content creator for EVE Online, but it's my biggest motivation to share my day-to-day gameplay and the things that I do in EVE is to get people excited for the things that I get excited about. And when that stuff changes, when my interest and my focus is changed, you see it in the content on the channel. So we're in a good spot right now, I think. But yeah, don't be surprised if we start going more the traveling nomadic kind of setup with mining. And I actually, I guess we can, that's just another good question too. It's is that even interesting? Obviously for me, it's fun, right? Being able to just jump in a ship and go down a wormhole chain and see what we see and experience what we experience. That's exciting to me. Does it translate to an exciting and engaging video or a series of videos? I don't know. I really don't know. So I'm actually, I would love insight on that, because there is exciting portions about doing consistent mining in high sec and stockpiling a lot of materials. But I think there's also, I think it's more interesting to see somebody travel freely across the entire universe without any care of political territories or having the freedom to just kind of go wherever, do whatever, experience whatever, and share all of that. I guess that's my ultimate goal I'm trying to get to. And who knows? Hopefully, maybe, hopefully this video and is motivating or intriguing to you guys, and hopefully your answers in the comments or whatever motivates me to maybe make that jump. Go on the proverbial road, as it were. One man, one prospect, infinite systems. Well, not infinite, but a lot of systems. And that's why nomadic mining started off. I started that series as a way to just like see if that kind of gameplay really jived with me. And obviously the scope of that series is mining at least one cycle in every high-sec system. But I can start to see how I would want to do more. I want to be able to like just go to any system and not necessarily track it on a list, not take the time to do that, but just like every day just go to a different system and experience different areas and just move from one side of the universe to another, and share whatever happens kind of along the way. And maybe that's a good concept for like even this series, solo mining. Maybe that would be like a good direction to go with all that stuff, but who's to say? But that's pretty much gonna be it for this episode. Now, just to give you guys some perspective, the content you're seeing, the Porpoise mining you're seeing, it was 4 hours essentially to mine the entire belt with just drones. It was like 26 million value, which obviously is not great. No one's surprised at that. I want to say it took like 3 hours to use up all the heavy water. The footage is sped up for this video because it basically took 4 hours of the mining session and condensed it down to a little over an hour, just to kind of cover the commentary for this episode. But that should be your main takeaway from this episode, is like, don't be afraid to like go out there and sit on a belt for 4 hours and just chill. No need to be paranoid. Be aware, but try not to be paranoid. Try to control the anxiety. And when you start to get to the point where you're calloused to a lot of what you read online and stuff, you start going out and experiencing things yourself. And if you lose a ship, dust it off and go on to the next. Like, that's when you start to really truly feel the freedom. When you can stop worrying about ISK and start worrying about fun, I guess. But in the beginning, you have to, I'm not gonna pretend like mining is expensive. Mining ships are expensive. In the beginning, you have to kind of build a bankroll. So it's like you kind of play more cautiously when you're in the beginning of your career. But if you're smart and you're aware of your surroundings and you make good decisions and you have good tactics or policies for different situations, as your career progresses, your bankroll increases and you're able to have a lot more flexibility when it comes to all that stuff. But that's pretty much going to be it. I know it's a very long-winded episode, a lot of concepts, a lot of questions, but I'm interested to see what you guys have to say and all that stuff, and feedback, insight, and everything. But that's going to be it for this episode of Solo Mining. See you in the next one.